Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Virtue Signal. I'm Bill Whittle with my friend and colleague Alfonso Rachel. And Zoe, you saw Fight Club, didn't you? That classic movie?
Not supposed to talk about Fight Club.
Well played. So here's something I thought might be an interesting conversation starter. So Fight Club has just premiered in China. And at the very end of Fight Club, spoiler alert, Tyler Durden has planted explosives and the entire city comes down. Skyscrapers just start coming down, and it's the absolute end of orderly rule and the beginning of anarchy. And that's what this whole thing is about, kind of insanity and anarchy and taking action and all the rest of it. So it is an extremely anti-authoritarian ending because here's this one lunatic, basically, he's blown up the entire society. Well, apparently the Chinese authorities felt the same way. And so they made a slight little edit to the end of Fight Club. And here's what they did. There's a scene where, as I said, where all the skyscrapers are about to fall down, and there's Tyler Durden and this girl are in there holding hands. And then just when the first of the explosions would go off, now tell me how artful this is. They cut to a title card, okay? They just cut to a title card. And this is what the title card says. Through the clue provided by Tyler, the police rapidly figured out the whole plan and arrested all criminals, successfully preventing the bomb from exploding. After the trial, Tyler was sent to a lunatic asylum receiving psychological treatment. He was discharged from the hospital in 2012. Well, it wraps that up nicely, doesn't it? We've sat through 90 minutes or something of plus of this movie. And then just at the absolute, as we say in the trade, denouement, nope, here's a card. Everything turned out just great. So here's what I'm interested about in this. And that is this word's been weaponized, but it's kind of the fragility, of totalitarianism, the fragility of it. The fact that no one is allowed to laugh at you, no one's allowed to make jokes at you, no one's allowed to threaten you. You have to suppress this, suppress that. We're getting that here as well. And I've always been so struck by not only how weak that is, but how weak that appears. This is pathetic. It really is. Are you really that worried after showing this entire movie that this is going to generate some kind of reaction in their citizens? Yes, they are. And they should be. They should be. So here we are in this open society where everybody's throwing all these names around and stuff. But the thing about totalitarianism and censorship, which again we're seeing here, is that to me it's a sign of unbelievable weakness of your position that you have to silence everybody else and make sure that everybody is on the same page.
Man, that ending sounds kind of anticlimactic for real.
You think? He turned out, the police saved everything. Don't worry, the situation's under control. He was taken to a psychiatric hospital and released in 2012 with a couple of scars. Right here.
Now, China's got a big market, for American movies, and American movie industry is dependent on China, whether they get funding or whether they're able to tap into their market. And China, and it's funny how China can put these kind of stipulations on it and make an attractive market for American movie makers. But it's like China's like this, like, look, we'll help you fund and we'll help fund you, and we will also help you tap into our market, but we're not going to allow you to play those movies that's messing up your country over there.
No, that's exactly right.
It's like, we see the formula. You go ahead.
That's exactly right.
That's how they do it, right? But concerning the fragility, though, man, I hear you. It's like, are you guys that afraid? Are you? Because it's let me say this really quick. I think, and I've mentioned this before, when we talk about fear, and we talk about, especially in conservative culture that is usually says that our government should fear us. The government should, we have freedom when the government fears the people.
Yep.
Here's the problem with that, though. When you have a faction that fears you, the natural reaction to that is for them to either control you or eliminate you. That's what you do to threats. That is a natural human inclination. That's a natural organic reaction. If you're afraid of it, you are either going to try to control it or destroy it. So what do we expect our government to do when we're telling the government, you're supposed to fear us? Government's going to be like, okay, well, we'll control you or destroy you. So we have to, in China, that's kind of the way it is. Now you have a government that is so afraid of it. I mean, in studying, martial arts, you learn about the history of what China does to people that they see as threats, like how they would burn the Shaolin temples and stuff like that. They would go and destroy these militias that would be forming. And speaking of which, my instructor, because, man, I was all about Fight Club when I first saw it, right? And I wanted my instructor to see it because, I was all about the fighting and whatnot. And I showed it to my instructor. And my instructor was basically, he came back the next day and basically was like, what the hell did you show me? He's like, is this what you got out of what I was teaching you? and now he understood, I guess, the whole reset aspect of it and using the martial arts to seek enlightenment and stuff like that. But remember, my instructor was also the one who said, this stuff ain't going to mean anything to you unless you have the Lord. If you don't have the Lord, you are just going to be a person who is seeking to brawl. You're going to fight for the wrong reasons. Your pursuits are not going to be noble. So, but at any rate, in China, this country that boasts, and you want to talk about geocentric, the name China, Zhongguo, means center of the earth.
Yeah, that's right. The Middle Kingdom. That's exactly right.
Right. Yeah. And in this country that has this boastfulness of who they are afraid to let their people have this free thought and examine things for themselves. But in a way, I kind of understand, because in America, we have this free thought and we're supposed to celebrate this free redress of grievances, our freedom of speech and whatnot. But at the same time, just like the founder said, hey, if you don't have this foundation, man, if you don't have, and I hate to use the word religious, but they're talking about Christ-centered. If you don't have this Christ-centered foundation, you're going to lose this republic. And a lot of the approach that's taken with, these creative liberties, and inundating our culture with these ideas through creative medium has done a lot of poisoning to our republic.
Yeah. And, it really does make you want to say, China, what are you so worried about? You are constantly thumping your chest and telling everybody that you're the future. And a lot of Americans believe that. A lot of people around the world, China's the next big thing. And so on. If you're the next big thing, then why do you have to cut that final 20 seconds out of a movie? What is it about it that scares you so much? This is why I don't fear China. Mm. I worry about them, and I'm not saying that everything's swell and they can't do any damage. They have done incredible amounts of damage. They continue to do incredible amounts of damage. They're going to do more damage in the future, no question. But I don't actually fear them in an existential way, because I don't think that a society that cannot watch the final frames of a movie is going to ever have the mental freedom to put things together in a new kind of way, which is what world leadership in technology is. Again, I don't have my head in the sand about this. I understand that they graduate more engineers every year than we do students. Our kids can't even read. I get all of that. I really do. But this kind of thing actually reassures me. If it turned out that China was welcoming criticism and all of this dynamicism and letting its people talk to each other, now that would actually be something I'd be really genuinely worried about, especially as those activities are suppressed here, as we're facing more and more. It's a weird kind of censorship. It's not, we're going to take you out and shoot you censorship. It's like, we'll take you out and destroy your reputation censorship. But I was just so struck by that, just how weak it is, how weak and how I guess this is where I'm trying to go with this. Not only how weak it makes China look to me, but it makes me wonder if they realize how bad this is in terms of this self-image that they spend so much time and money trying to groom.
Indeed, man. Self-image, man. That's a good phrase to go with, because in that self-image, I reckon they want to defend that self-image. And one of the things that, my instructor told, me, and I refer to my instructor a lot because I was instructed in Chinese boxing. So in a lot of that culture, that was something that was a big part of the curriculum. And, when we talk about self-defense, he really took it literally. It's not just self-defense as in defending yourself against other people or some sort of external opposition, but it is defending yourself from yourself, self-defense. You have to know how to defend yourself in mind, body, defend your immune system, all these things. You're defending your system altogether. And with China, when they're talking about defending their self-image, once again, like I said, if you really don't have a solid moral compass, even your self-defense can be corrupted. It can be perverted. It can become more toxic. You can be more toxic to yourself trying to do all these things to defend yourself, including your image, because their defense of their image, of course, is rooted in pride. So even when something like a movie like this, where you're going to cut out that last frame because why? Are you afraid that that your culture is going to go with the idea that we need to bring down the whole establishment, whatever this establishment is, the establishment of commerce or government or anything in between. All this needs to be brought down and reset. Whereas China is like, well, we're not going to have that, and the way that we're going to do this is by the method of a heavy hand, rather than, whereas with us, we have the freedom and I think at this point, there's still enough of it in play where we haven't done that, where we haven't just made a full charge of just exploding things to get what it is that we want. There has to be some sort of diplomatic discourse or some compelling narrative in the culture, counter narrative, that we're supposed to say, hey, if I may really quick, reflect on a piece that you had just done, in the Stratosphere Lounge, where you're talking about Cerebus, this trifecta hound of government, the press, and the so-called free market, or big business, and how it's being used. These things right now have not been taken control of in the free market. There's been a lot of complacency and whatnot. These things that we're supposed to have the freedoms to be able to check have now grown into its own monster, a three-headed hellhound, if you will. So that's supposed to be something that we're supposed to have the power to maintain. And it makes it look like, dang, China, did you have the right approach? Because you've got control over your people, whereas we're supposed to have the moral fortitude based in something really solid and eternal to check the market, the press, and the government, and be able to scruff that three-headed dog, you know what I'm saying? Scruff that three-headed dog and say, hey, no, you're not doing this, and rub their nose in it and say, now get back to the business of governing with the authority that you've been blessed with, and do it right. Just like I said about Moses. Hey, Moses, you got the law, man, but that law is looking back at you too, because it's written on both sides of the tablet.
If I was president, I understand enough about this mimetic war, this war of ideas. I'd just love to have been at a press conference and somebody says, Mr. President, did you hear that China cut the final scene out of Fight Club and replaced it with a, hey, everything's okay, government's in control kind of thing. What's your opinion on that? And I would have just paused for a minute and I would have gone, what you afraid of? What are you so afraid of, you chickens? Just mocking them. I think that you can probably look at this two ways. First of all, just to hammer this last point home, the reason that China took that scene out was they didn't want the people getting any ideas. We don't want them getting any big ideas. And my entire point is that the future belongs to people who get big ideas. You can't shut down that aspect of discussion and intercourse and argument. You can't shut that down and still have this reactor that produces all this stuff. Pick one. So there's that. I think another thing here, it's kind of to what you were talking about. There's two ways you can save your kid from drowning. You can either lobby that every single body of water has a 8-foot high chain link fence and security cameras, lifeguards everywhere, on every pond, on every stream. You can put them in a life jacket when they go to school, and all of this. Or you could teach them how to swim, right? That's the two ways you can accomplish that goal. You can either increase the capability of the person you're worried about, or you can try to get all potential threats off the table. That's what China's doing. But we have the confidence to just say, hey, we attack ourselves all the time, to say the least. This whole channel, this whole show's criticism of when we do things wrong as a country, we try to get some in there when we do it right. But I think what I was reminded of, Zoe, is like almost like on a gut level, if ideas that you don't like are a virus, China's attitude is to lock everybody down, put everybody in masks, weld the door shut, and don't let anybody out. Our attitude should be, all right, let's let this virus just run through the population, and it'll do some damage, yes, but we have immunity, and this will strengthen our immune system against the next little virus that comes along. And this two different ways of seeing the entire world, locking it out versus no, let it roll, man. I could take it. It's not that these ideas don't do damage. And speaking of China, example I always used for years and years and years was in 1964, they made a movie called The Manchurian Candidate with Frank Sinatra. And this whole idea of brainwashing was really pretty new in 1964. The idea that you could psychologically condition somebody to do something. So in The Manchurian Candidate, the Chinese psychologically conditioned this former prisoner of war to kill the president. And the big investigation. So they remade the movie in 2007 with Denzel Washington. But this time it's not the Chinese government that's doing the brainwashing to set up the assassination. It's the Manchurian Corporation, a group of American businessmen. And when that happened, I realized, hey, look at that. We have made ourselves the villains in a story that was about communist red Chinese brainwashing. It's a good story, but now we've made ourselves into the villains. And I think that's damaging to us, but we did it. And I have always been not just amazed and surprised, but actually deeply contemptful of people that take the we've got to build a capsule around this so that nothing can get in and hurt us. I've always found that to be insane, number one, and number two, cowardly. I'm a much bigger fan of saying, yeah, just take the hits and toughen up, and take another hit and toughen up. I just think it's a much better way to go through life. I think it's more effective to protect the values of your society, and I think it's certainly a lot more fun.
Yeah, man. And Lincoln himself said that, hey, if America's going to go down, it's most likely going to be because of factions from the inside, rather than externally, to paraphrase. And, when movies like that come out, it would be good if it was a little bit more specific, because it's not like those things aren't true in America. There are factions from the inside that are trying to bring America down, but they're of a certain mindset. And those mindsets usually tend to lean to the left. And I'm not trying to make it so much about Republican or Democrat, because with the Democrats, the thing is, that's just how they're wired. Their mentality is wired to be in rebellion against the Constitution. That's just what the Constitution speaks of them.
They're control freaks.
Yeah, it's like the Constitution speaks of rebellion. It speaks of the rebellious, and these people need to be warned about. That's who the Democrats are. Now, Republicans, I'm not trying to say the Republicans are perfect, but in principle, it's more friendly to the Constitution and the Word of God. But you're unfortunately going to have deviants. But innately, Republicans is going to be the friendliest in terms of what the Constitution is. And I say that because when we have these movies that just want to generalize America having these evil corporations and factions, like, yeah, man, yeah, that exists, but be a little bit more specific about who it is. But unfortunately, they don't do that. I guess if they want to get funding for those movies, they ain't going to do that. And it would be nice if we had a counter narrative, a creative narrative to be able to do that. It's funny, like, because China, with the competitive spirit that they have, basically competing against other nations, they don't allow that spirit so much to flourish, as we see if they're cutting things out of movies and stuff like that. But in America, we do have that competitive spirit that we're able to freely exercise and do those things with. And it would be great if we had another side of that narrative that was just, because we're always saying, especially in the conservative circle, we're always saying, well, competition breeds excellence. Competition breeds excellence. But the ones who are taking the most advantage of competition and concerning the culture is liberals themselves. They take more advantage of competition, the free market, and they're using the free market to eliminate the free market.
Yeah.
Where are we, competing in these mediums? Because if we don't, man, we can end up being just like China, because that's what they're doing here. We're being silenced more and more to where the government is going to have the say so on what we can create. We're products of it right now. We don't have permission from the state to go ahead and create the way that we want to do and bring our content to the people that we're trying to do. So we're getting a little taste of it now. We're among the first on the front lines in this culture war, who are being casualties of it. And hopefully, we can be, let out of the stockades, and back on the scene.
Well, we'll deal with that in the second show that we do this week called Compliance. But just to wrap this up, I think for me, Zoe mentioned earlier that American studios will do things like this. I mean, ultimately, it's like, what does that say? I can't even say the word integrity in Hollywood in the same sentence, really, without having to just do what I just did, just to say, you would think that the people that sold this movie to China would have the integrity to say, no, you don't get to do that. If you're going to do that, Hollywood for 20 years now has been not only needing China's market, but depending on it. And certainly there's a loop there. There's no question that China not only has veto power and censorship power over the movies that Hollywood will make in terms of, well, we don't like that, so you're going to take it out of the movie or else you don't get our market. As the American movie market continues to shrink because the politics get more and more woke, the studios in Hollywood become more and more dependent on overseas revenue, which, for the sake of the argument, is China. So they're actually in a little feedback loop of failure. Because what's happened, if I look back over the last 10 years or so, what I see is China putting money into Hollywood to make anti-American movies. Americans, by and large, are not going to see those movies. So those movies are not doing well without the Chinese dollars and the Chinese audience that comes in. So in a weird sort of way, the logical end of this is that China will pay Hollywood to make movies that only China would like. That's really where we're headed. Mm-hmm. And that should be a source of real comfort to you. It's a source of comfort to me. If we were buying this stuff, I'd be really worried. But they're not. So I'm not. That'll do it for this edition of the Virtue Signal, made possible by the members at BillWhittle.com. We've been teasing releasing this thing that Zoe and I have been working on for months now, been teasing it forever. COVID knocked 5 weeks, I guess, out of that. But I would say keep your eyes open because we're going to show you something really, really, really different in the next couple of days. So looking forward to hearing from all of you on that one. Until next week, for Alfonso, Rachel, I'm Bill Whittle. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time on the Virtue Signal.